Hi, and welcome to our latest video where we're going to talk to you about how to raise your frequency, maybe why you want to do that, and the benefits. Where should we start?
I think that when we're talking about raising frequency, that it's basically things that people don't understand. A lot of people talk about, oh, yes, we need to move into this dimension, that dimension. I need to increase my frequency.
It's almost like a buzzword, isn't it?
Yeah.
You hear it all over the place, but what does it actually even mean?
Yeah. From my perspective, when I'm talking about increasing my frequency, for anyone that's read a primer of the Zeta Race or the Zeta interviews, they will have heard about a process called heterodyning. And heterodyning is something similar to when you use binaural beats, two different frequencies meeting in one space and causing an effect. And so as a medium, I seek to heterodyne using breathing, and that increases my frequency, and I move into spaces of contact with the spirit people or extraterrestrials. So for me, raising my frequency has a specific connotation. Another person may just say that raising their frequency for them is about being in kindness or being compassionate or loving. And that's a wonderful place to be, absolutely. So we could look at it from a couple of different perspectives. Am I looking to raise my frequency to avoid negative situations, negative energy?
Yeah, and it's a good way to keep stuff from coming to us in many ways, isn't it?
Or am I seeking to raise my frequency to protect my energetic space? And so you've just named 3 or 4 different areas there, and it's probably really important to understand all the differences of them.
So where does the human vibrational frequency sit at its natural level?
From what I've read, I believe that the Schumann frequency is the grounding frequency for humanity.
Yeah, it's kind of like the baseline of the human frequency.
We'll just say 8. Just say 8 as a number. Will give us some numerical values. So then when I'm in an altered state and the Zetas are coming to me, I could be in a cycle pattern of 12. Once they're speaking through, we could be 16. So as you can see, we've actually doubled the frequency. What about spirit people? Spirit people are a little bit different.
They're much closer.
They're much closer to our frequency. You don't really need to increase your frequency too much. That's how mental mediums work. Yeah,
and spirit people, I think they obviously they find it very easy to work with us because we are them, just with the human body involved. But when they do come to work with us in much deeper altered states, they generally do that for us, that lifting process, don't they? But if as a medium you can learn to do it yourself, you can really give them a helping hand, and it can really improve the connection you have to your guides.
So there's 3 things. So one is you're seeking to lift your own frequency, which can be done with various methods. The second way is you're seeking to work in with spirits in mediumistic capacity. And the spirits, generally what they do is they train the medium. The medium just drops into an altered state, and then the spirit person
take over
with them, gives inspirational messages, information. And the other one is extraterrestrial contact, completely got nothing to do with spirit contact or increasing your frequency. It's about increasing your heterodyne states. And heterodyning, yes, it's complicated. It's can be a whole book on it, which is true. It's,
a whole chapter in
a book. And actually to teach people how to heterodyne is also quite difficult as well.
Yeah, it takes some time.
Yeah.
Remind me what the where do the Zetas sit? They're on, is it 30?
It depends on what state they're in. So the question is, what is your natural state? So your natural state in the physical is 3-dimensional. You're sitting in the Schumann frequency.
Yeah.
But your higher self's natural state is outside of the physical three-dimensional space. It's sitting in a much higher frequency, isn't it? And the construct, which is your mind sitting in the middle, is negotiating or navigating what's going on in between.
So actually that leads on really nicely to a question that was asked in our last members sitting with the Zetas. How do we do it? How do we raise our frequency? What can we do?
As sitters or as mediums?
I think as just people generally, how can we be in a higher vibrational state? So maybe start with that.
To me, I think it's easy in the beginning, and it's more about you think about your actions and
being mindful, and
you're looking at what you're actually doing on a minute by minute basis. You're living in the now, right? Yeah. And in that moment, rather than being angry at somebody, you could show kindness or show more patience.
Non-judgmental.
Even at that point, you are increasing your frequency. You're looking after your own energy.
Yeah, right? Housekeeping.
Yeah, housekeeping.
The things are like our food as well. The food that we eat apparently has a large effect on our vibrational frequency as well. People do say eat lightly, don't they, for a better connection. What about the music we listen to?
Oh, absolutely. And just talking about that, yeah, music affects people differently, and so everybody is can either alter or lower their frequency using music. But something that I was looking at the other day was when we acknowledge the food that we eat.
Yeah.
So food has consciousness. Plant material has consciousness. Meat has consciousness. And when we acknowledge that something is giving life to us through its own life force, we, even in that space of gratitude for the food that we are to consume, that then lifts up our frequency.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure that when we're talking about the conversation of, moving into a fifth dimensional framework, that we understand that the human frequency's job or role is to keep us at a specific level. It doesn't mean that you need to be ungrounded to be in a higher dimensional space, but your physical body exists in a specific framework.
Yeah.
And that framework then determines how your consciousness is melded to the physical form. If we choose to heterodyne, breathe, increase our frequency, we can do these things to certain extents. I'll give you an example. It's not easier to be kind, but it's better to be kind. It's better to be compassionate. That's an action that you can perform all day. Ask somebody that meditates how easy or difficult it is to meditate all day. That's a completely different process. You may have had to practice for years to be able to meditate all day. If you then talk to somebody who's a medium, a deep trance medium, and they're in trance, those spaces that they go into, they can only hold them for a very short time. Could be an hour or 2 hours maximum. They'll then not go back into those spaces for at least 48 hours because the potential to become ungrounded in those states is very, very high.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a range of different frequencies, and we've identified different types of frequencies, knowing that when we are talking about these conversations, that we are saying, yes, one is more easier to achieve because it's through action. The other one, although it has action, also has levels of consequences associated with it, but from an energetic perspective.
Consciousness processes. Yeah. So, and I guess that leads on to just acknowledging and taking on from what you said about our bodies are very much a 3D process in a 3D environment. When we raise our frequency, it is just a temporary process. I mean, if we're eating well and we're being kind and all, and all those things we talked about, we're probably lifting ourselves up. But when we go into a trance process with a spirit person, or into a heterodyne process with an extraterrestrial, there's like a spike, an exponential spike, but it does come back down again. Our bodies don't dissolve or disappear because we've heterodyned with a fifth or sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth dimensional being. It just means our consciousness is elevated to that frequency for that temporary period. And, you know, you need to ground, and there are obviously various specific processes that you would need to follow to be able to ground after you've finished that connection process.
Although I would say that when you are with these beings like Arcturians, the Palladians, you do feel like you have disappeared.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's been plenty of times when I've been with the Zetas, and my whole body, as far as my consciousness is concerned, my body, I'm existing without my body. My body is just gone. But of course, it's not gone. It's just my consciousness is at an elevated frequency. It returns, and I'm very much here.
This brings us to a point, though. How long does it take to develop? What about your development process? So we've been talking about frequency and moving up into those spaces of communication. Yeah. So communicating with beings. Yeah. How long has it taken you to get to a point where you can hold a certain time frame?
Well, I started working with spirit people and working in altered states. I think I did the maths the other day, and it was some 30 years ago. Right.
But actually holding those states of connection with them, why is that difficult?
Why is it difficult? Yeah. It takes focus, patience, absolute dedication. You know, anybody who's just starting off in the process is going to have to essentially commit their kind of life to, I guess, to the process in order to maintain and sustain those connection processes.
What if you stay there too long? So we're talking about raising frequency. So you've raised your frequency to sit with the Zetas. Yeah. What happens if you stay in that space too long?
That's not fun. Basically, it's not much fun at all. The Zetas have a very specific way of training a human to be able to connect with them on a conscious level.
Would you say that's the same for all races?
I would have thought so, but that's the only extraterrestrial race I work with at this point. So I'm talking from my own experience. Right. And I know that if I stay 1 minute past that that set time, that the next day, or even with shortly half an hour after I've finished, I'm going to be
feeling a little bit
definitely feeling unbalanced, ungrounded, and that can manifest in different ways. Thankfully, we're very good at our timekeeping, and so I think it's only happened twice. But those aren't, I wouldn't want to repeat that.
This isn't just for people that are working towards contacting extraterrestrials. There are many mediums that work with spirits that also, when they
overstay.
One of the good things that was said to me in the beginning was working with spirits is like having a TV on in your lounge room. It's always on, but whether you are watching the TV is up to you. Whether you acknowledge what's on the TV is up to you. And that's really important, because if we're always watching the TV, it means that we're always interacting with spirits. And that means we're always in an elevated frequency, because the spirits are a different frequency than us. Like we talked about the radio analogy, spirit realm is on one station, we are on another.
And we need to be able to turn that radio off. That's the thing. We only tune in when we're working. You know, we teach mediums to really define their working time and space with the beings that they're working with, to stop that ungrounding process from developing. You know, when I've come across people who try to maintain their connection to their guides 24/7, and I'm not talking about, you know, they're around, and if you needed to call them, they'd come, that they are forward in the person's consciousness, virtually forward the entire time. And it's very difficult to talk to these people. you know, you don't get much sense out of them. They're not grounded. They're, you know, it's like they're in a perpetual state of daydreaming. There's nothing, it's like there's nobody home. So it's really important to define what you're doing with whoever you're working with and come back to ground.
You'd be surprised. People think that grounding is the opposite of elevation of frequency. It's not. It's actually the opposite. Grounding can actually make you feel much better, even from a health perspective as well. When you're doing that interchange between yourself and the earth energies, the way that it brings you down into a much more grounded, relaxed state. Relaxation is very good for the physical body. It's good for the mind, and it puts you into a much better space. That then is the catalyst for moving into.
It's the optimal place to begin, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It doesn't. It's common sense, really, isn't it? You know, when we think we're in a 3D environment with a 3D body, and the 3D environment we're in has a certain frequency to it. You know, it's quite obvious that we're not supposed to be in these highly elevated states for too long. And it's quite easy to understand why it would cause somebody a problem if they were.
Residual issues, for sure. Yeah.
So, to conclude, are we ready to conclude?
I'd say we should conclude.
If we summed it up in a nutshell.
Even the bell
that
told us that we should conclude.
So if you want to just generally increase your frequency a little, eat lighter, be aware of the effect that music can have on you, be aware of the effect of large crowds of people, what EMF, all these different you know, influences around us on a daily basis have on us and our mood, which is quite often in direct correlation with our frequency. We're in a bad mood, we might be in a lower frequency. You're in a good mood, you might be in a higher frequency. And then if, of course, you're working towards mediumship ability, in whatever form that comes, I guess you can think about, obviously there's clearing, there's breathing processes we can use, all sorts of techniques.
So basically you're doing a checkup from the neck up.
That's your phrase.
That's right. All right, guys. We'll catch you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.